On the
So we
bottom?
left off yesterday on Yud Chet Amud Bet. We were going through a lot of different agadic statements of Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. So now we're continuing on with him. Okay, so we are 7 lines up from the bottom of the page. Last word line is V'amar Rebbe. So V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. Kol Beit sheshman bo divrei Torah b'layla shuv eno necharav shenemar v'lo amar ayeh Eloha oseh noten zirot b'layla. So how do you know that if there is words of Torah being learned at night, that it'll never be destroyed? So as the pasuk states, so where is God my maker who who gives song in the night? So assuming that you still have the songs at night, you'll never need to, i.e. keep learning at night, you'll never have to have your house being destroyed. There's also parallels, a lot of statements about the importance of increasing learning of Torah as the days get shorter and the nights grow longer, because a lot of it, in pre-modern era, when your functional hours for working in the fields and your day job were limited to sunlight. So therefore, as the days got shorter and the nights got longer, that would give you more time to learn Torah, and therefore you should make sure to avail yourself of that. Because the reason why it's still saying at night is because at night is when you're supposed to be learning Torah, because during the day you're assumed to have a job. So that's why it's particularly at night. So continuing on the statements of Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar. Miyom shachar Beit Midrash dayo la'olam sheishtamesh b'shtei otiyot she'emar kol hanashmat hallelujah hallelujah. So as once the Beit Midrash was destroyed, you only need to use 2 words, which is the Yud and the Hey, for God's name, and that's why the pasuk says kol hanashmat hallelujah hallelujah. Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar nitkala Bavel shenitkalu shchenea nitkala Shamron yibarchu shchenea. So when Bavel was cursed, its neighbors were cursed, but when the Shomron, meaning the northern Israel, was cursed, its neighbors got blessed. Ikala Bavel b'nikalu shcheinah, Jotiv v'samtia, l'morash, kipud, v'agmei mayim. So when Bavel was cursed, so too were around it, and that's why it says, I will make a possession for the wild birds and pools of water, of swamps. So that's meaning that there'll be a lot of wild animals, and the whole area will be swampland, which is not very helpful for anybody. But Nikalu Shamron Baruch. But when Shamron was destroyed, it was a blessing for its neighbors. Because the curse of Shamron, it says, therefore I will turn Shamron into a heap of rubble in the field for planting of vines. So which means that Shamron is destroyed, at least their neighbors can, plant vineyards over their former residences. Yeah, very bad for the people of Shamron, but for the neighbors, not so bad. It's a blessing because they get more place for their vineyards. Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar, so Rabbi says, the way that God works is not the same as man works. So for a man, right, so in order to make sure when he's getting put to death, they make sure to give him a gag, or putting a iron wooden hook into his mouth, in order to make sure that he can't curse the king as he's brought to his death. But the way it works when God sends somebody to death is they don't have time to curse God. They're simply silent. And they have no ability to either. So Shadamar Lacha Dumia Tehila. As it's stated in Tehillim, for you silence is praise. Which means that it's a praise, not only this person not cursing God, they're praising God as they go to their death. The and even more, it seems to be that his death serves not only as praise of God, but it serves as if he himself is offering up a korban to God. That's what it says, and you shall be performing a vow, meaning you'll have brought your korban neder has been brought now. So similarly, Hanan Amar, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Ma'ativ Ovrei be'emek habacha, Mayan Yishitiu, Gam Rachot Yetem. So here we have a statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, darshaning another pasuk of Tehillim. Okay, so what's the other pasuk of Tehillim? So those who pass through the valley crying, weeping, turn it. So they'll turn the valley where they're crying will then turn into a freshwater spring, and early rain, right, will cover it in blessing, right? So Moreh being the rain, and then the Tevik Bracha is being covered in blessing. So now we're going to dive into the pasuk, see which each one refers to, and why this is similar to what we had above. Ovrei Elu Bnei Adam Shavrin Al Tzadok Shagok Baruch Hu. We said Ovrei, people passing through. Those are the Ovrei Ve'era, who go against what God wants. Emek Shemamikin Lahem Gehenim. And the word Emek is there to say that their wickedness makes Gehenim deeper for themselves. Habacha Bochin Moridid Ma'ot Mayan Shel Shitin means that they are crying, making tears flow like a spring of the foundations, being a very deep well, which a very deep spring, which flows very strongly. That so when we say that the early rain is covering over the blessing, so that means that they view the judgment placed on them as being just and correct. And that what do they? And they say in front of God, Rabbona Shalom. Yafet danta, yafet ziketa, yafet chiyafta, yafet tikanta, yehenom l'rashaim gan eden, l'rashaim gan eden tzadikim. So they speak to Hashem, saying, you've judged correctly, you have acquitted properly, you have properly condemned, and it was right of you to have created Gehenna for the wicked and Gan Eden for the righteous. Is this really so? But this is really how things work out, that they'll quietly go about their way and they don't protest. But didn't Rish Lakish say that the wicked people sit by the entrance of Gehenna and they don't even do tshuva? As it says, they shall go forth and look upon the corpses of men who have sinned. And what does the verse say? Shapashu, those that Lonamar does not say that they had sinned. Allah haposhim, rather those who are constantly sinning. Shapushim holchin olam, but they never repent. They're always sinning, even when they're in Gehenna. Lo kasha, havoshe Israel, havoshe motolam. No, there's a difference. So who are the people who accept God's judgment and then go quietly and then realize that they deserved it? That is the Poshei Israel. Those amongst the Jewish people who erred. But Poshei Motolam, but the sinners of the non-Jewish nation, they're the ones who will curse God for all eternity. So that good explained it that way. Except now we've had a problem. Poshei Israel ain't or Gehenim shlotet bahen. So the problem that Rizal said somewhere else, that the sinners of Israel, the heat of Gehenna, the fire of Gehenna, has no power over them. So, and they just learned it from a Kal V'chomer, right? A 40-year argument based on the Mizbeach HaZahav, the golden altar in the Mishkan and later the Beit Mikdash. So Mizbeach HaZahav. Oh no, sorry. This is for the this is for the Mizbeach that was constructed originally for the Mishkan. So I was describing how they did construct based on the construction of the Mizbeach HaZahav and the question of how on earth did it not burn to pieces. So Magal zahav she'en alav ela ka'ovi dinar zahav amad kama shanim v'lo shata ba'or. So just like the Mizbeach HaZahav, which was the golden altar, which is in the Kodesh of the Mishkan, that it only had a thickness of a dinar coin of gold coating it, which is very thin. So think of roughly thickness of, let's say, I guess like a quarter. Right, it's not very thick. And it was able to sustain many years of repeated use for burning of incense, and without the wood being burnt, or being affected by the heat. But the Jews were filled with mitzvot like a pomegranate, as says the Shirim, that your temples are like a split pomegranate behind your veil, right? So meaning that basically you're like that's the source of Yehei Spirit of Malak Rimon. So this is that Drush is based off of. Don't read this as your temples. Rather read it as your empty ones. So meaning even the emptiest of the Jews, right? They're still filled with mitzvah. So that's why they would even so the Jews would not be as we had before, right? So now we're saying why this is necessary, why this leads to contradiction. So el hadiktiv of rei hamek babacha. So what did we said before about those who are in the valley and crying, who are really sinners and are never giving up. So that's only at that exact moment when they were convicted. But then our forefather Avraham Avinu comes up and raises them and receives them, and therefore they will not be suffering as much. Okay, and now and then on the other side, bar, except for one type of sin, bar Yisrael Shabbat al Hagoya, Damashko Orlato, Velo Mavajak Arlay. So the only person this doesn't apply for is for somebody who had relations with a non-Jewish woman, who the punishment is that his foreskin is drawn, meaning they undo his Brit Milah, which then triggers Mkarit, and therefore Avraham will recognize him with Avraham being the first one who had a Brit Milah, so therefore the Zchuyot of Avraham will not protect him. Okay, Makivlar of Kahana, Hashazamar Taposhiim to Pashe Vazli. So when this is Taposhim, those are those who have sinned and go on sinning. Ella Meata the Hamotzi, the Hamala, the Mesek Mapiko. So then wait. So if that's really true that they're the sinners that keep on sinning, then what do we mean by that they are? We're saying that God's the one, that God will take us out and God raises us up. Then isn't God the one who's doing that? Rather, what the pasuk meant is that He already has raised them up and brought them out. Here too, the phrase referring to those who had already rebelled. So basically, those who would be subject to unable to being saved, to those who kept on sinning afterwards, and therefore the sins never left them. So back to our protagonists for these statements. We've got Rabbi Yehuda ben Elazar saying there's three entrances to Gehenna. One way in is through the desert, one way in is through the ocean, one way in is through Yerushalayim. So so the one in Midbar, we learned from Korach and Datan Aviram were swallowed whole, and then they went down, them and all that they had went down alive to Sheol. Sheol is another word for term for towards the Gehenna, and so that's where they were going. So now Bayam Ditiv Mibetan Sheol Shivati Shamati Kuli. Okay, and another one comes from the from Yonah, where he says where he's praising God for saving him while he was in the stomach of the big fish. As he says, out of the belly of the netherworld, right of Sheol, I cried out to you, and you heard my voice. So how about Yerushalayim? So Yerushalayim, how do the Yerushalayim also has a way there. Ditiv ne'um Hashem asher or lo v'tzion tanur lo Yerushalayim. So it says the pasuk, fire is in Zion, and the furnace is in Yerushalayim. Matanas Rabbi Yishmael explains this pasuk meaning asher or lo v'tzion is there Gehenom. So when it says that when the fire that is in Zion, that is Gehenom, but Tanur lo Yerushalayim zo picha shel Gehenom. So the first part is about in general about that there is such a place called Gehenom even in Israel, and then how do you know the entrance? That's Tanur lo Yerushalayim. That's the entrance, right? So normally when you're opening up an oven, right? So there's the entryway, and then there's the actual fire is. So the way you get in is through Yerushalayim. But two Leica. Wait, what do you mean? There's only 3 entrances? That seems too few. Hamar Marian Amar Yeshua ben Levi Vamri la Tana Rabba Bar Marian to be debate or Yochanan Zakai. So, but didn't we learn that from Rabbi Marion or learn this from Rabba Bar Maron of Yochanan Zakai that states Marot Yesh Begay Ben Hinnom V'Ola Asham Ben Ayen. So actually, there should be another entrance, which is there's 2 date trees in the Gay Ben Hinnom Valley, and then there's smoke from there. V'zehu shashaninu tzine har barzel kasherot v'zohi bicha shel Gehenom. So as it says, the palms of Har Barzel are fit. Sorry, for the palms of Har Barzel are fit for the mitzvah of love, and that also happens to be the case of. That's also the place where the entrance to Gehenna is found. So Dilma Hayu Yerushalayim, maybe Gehenna Bar Gay Ben Hinnom and Yerushalayim, they literally right next to each other. So maybe they did the same thing. So Amar Yeshua ben Levi Sheva Shemot Yesh Gehenna. There's 7 names for Gehenna. Ve'Elohein. Here are them all. Sheol, Babadon, Uver Shachat, Uvor Sha'on, Betit Hayaven, Salmavet, the Eretz HaTachti. So whenever you see any of these words used, they're all referring to Gehenna. So now we're going to go through the psukim and places they come up to see why that's what they mean. So Sheol Dichti, Mibetin Sheol, Shivati, Shemati, Koli. This is the one that we mentioned before. Avadon Dichti, Hayisu Par, Bakaver, Chasecha, Amnocha, Bavadon. This one is from Tehillim. So your steadfast love shall be spoken from the grave. Your faithfulness and destruction, right? And so since you've sinned, then therefore that's why and you're crying out. So you're crying out from Gehenna. Be'er Shachat, from the death pit. So Dichtiv Kilot Azov Nafshi Lishol Lo Lutein Chatitech Lirot Shachat. So as you've not abandoned my soul to Sheol, and you've not given your kindness to see me go down to the pit. So therefore, Shachat is parallel to Sheol. So now we've got another one teaching us about another word for Gehenna is Be'er Shachat. Uvor Sha'on Matit Yaven. How do you know about those 2 words? So V'Ya'aleini Mibor Sha'on Umitit Yaven. So this is also in Tehillim, and it says, "You brought me up from the gruesome pit and from the miry clay," both of which are referring to you having raised me up, which means that you were somewhere really terrible, i.e., Gehenna. And we know another one, and for Salmavet is from the verse also Tehillim that is set in darkness and in the shadow of death. Salmavet, the shadow of death. So that means where are you in the shadow of death? That's where you're again. The Eretz HaTachti Kumaru, and as far as knowing that Eretz HaTachti is also one that we learned out from tradition, right? So, but 2 lekas that read V'ha'ika Gehenna. Wait, what do you mean? What about the word Gehenna? Like, so like why do we stop it? Why is Gehenna also named there? And quote unquote, Geish Amuka, a Shakol Yordim Ba'os Gehinam. So why do you say that there's another place which is, if you see the word Gehenna also refers to to Gehenna. So, and what's the etymology of Gehenna? It's a valley that is as deep as the valley of Gay Ben Hinnom, in which all descend in vain for their wasteful acts. So now we say, what about, so that's another one we should throw in. I didn't have anything else. But you got Taftet. What about, this is another term, which is Wana Taftet. Ki Aruch Metmol Taftet. As it says, for its hearth is ordained of old. Meaning this is like, so Hahu Shakol Mitpateh B'Yitro Yipol Sham. So which shows in the right. You're right. It also is another way to say Gehenna. This pasuk from Yeshaya, because you could read Taftet. I mean that anybody who is seduced by their Yetzer will fall into there. So that would mean that the word Taftet also means Gehenna. So now we're going to talk about Gan Eden. So no more depressing stuff. Some happy things now. Okay, Gan Eden. Amar Shlakish. Yisrael Beit Sham Pitcha. So how do you get, where's the entrance to Gan Eden in this world? So Shlakish says if it's in Israel, it's from Beit Sham. So that's what the entrance is. So you should really, so if you're ever in Israel, make sure if it's Beit Sham, because it's beautiful, right? Or because it'll help you get to Gan Eden. One of the two. V'im ba'aravya. And if you are, but if the entrance is talking about in Arabia, Beit Garam Pitcha, then it would be the place called Beit Garam. The Im Ben and Naharot. So Arabia would be, let's say in Saudi Arabia or in those regions. So it'd be a place called Beit Garam. The Im Ben and Naharot, meaning if it's found somewhere in Bavel, it's Dumas Kenin Pitcha. Then it'll be found in Dumas Kenin. Right? Because this is another place which is very fertile, and so that also be a place that would be the entrance to Gan Eden. So Bavel, Abai, Mishtabach, Pere, de Ma'avar, Yamina, Rav Mishtabach, Pera, de Harpanaya. So now the Gemara says that in Bavel, so Abai would particularly praise fruits. They're on the bank. They're on the right bank of the Euphrates, whereas Rav would praise those of the area called Harpanaya. Okay. Now we're finally getting back to our discussion of Eruvin again. Okay, so right, and the distance between them is the size of two teams. Shita Kim Tana Lake Shirot Havu Anayadana Dula Havi Mutarot. What do you even need to state that they're between like loose and tied? If we say that they are Shirot, that means that they're not untied. Not obvious. Moderatim, what would you have thought? Shirot ain't Shirot. When they tied, I mean not they're literally tied, but they're close as if they are. That the measurement isn't just based on if they're not tied, you have to actually tie them when you're doing the measurements. Okay, so enough for one to fit in and one to be pulled out. Tana.
Rabbi, just with all this, I got it, and now we're back in here. Could you just recap what we're talking about here?
We're currently talking about the width of a lap for a. Let me share photos. So we're back at Pasi Biraut, right? So you've got the you've got the wall in the middle, and you've got these corners on the side. And the question is, how big can the gap in the middle here be, before it becomes too big and makes the whole area unusable again?
So when we're saying about two teams, we're talking about the animals?
The two teams of oxen, yes.
Oxen, okay. And that would equal 10 amas?
We'll get to the exact measurements in just a moment.
Okay.
So when we say enough, so when one goes in, one goes out. So Tana Rivka Nechleset Rivka Yotzei. So you said in a Tosefta that one goes in, one goes out. Tana Rabbanon. So we have another Brayta stating that Kama Roshav Rubash Parash Dayama. So how much is this end to be in the end? So we say that the head and the majority of the body is 2 amma. But Kama of Yashal Paran, how wide is an amma? That's amma Ushnei Shlish Shei amma. And how wide is it? It's an amma and 2/3. Shein Ke'eser, which means altogether it's about 10. Diver B'Meir. So that would mean that it's around 10. That's what B'Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kishloshes Rama Arbas Rama. So where Rabbi Yehuda says no, when you do the math, it ends up being 13 or 14. So now we're gonna now we're gonna say now we're gonna try and analyze the statement of how exactly big is the gap between the Yumdin or the Pasin. So how much is the gap you're allowed to have? So Keser. Eser Havyan. What do you mean like 8, like 10? It is 10. Mishum to buy limit sefa kishloshes, right? No, why they say like 10? Because at the end they're saying like 13 or 14, so now they're saying like 10. Kishloshes, right? So we're talking about the gap we have here. What do you mean saying that it's about 13? Okay, so and let's just scroll back up so we can see what it would look like in terms of with the animals here. Okay, right. So this is how it would look with the animals. So, what do you mean it's like 13? It should be more than that. So why they say like 13? It was like, was it more? Is it 13? No, there's parallel language again. Ukar basar halo havya. What do you mean by 14? You can't have it being 14. That's too much. Amar papa yiterot al shloshes benar magiyot larbasar. Rather, the Mishnah is trying to communicate to you that it is that is more than 13, but not quite 14. So now we're going to try and figure out. Right. So the question is how would that work out? So that would be based on. Remember, we said it was 1 2/3. So you either have 1 2/3 times 6, which will give you precisely 10, or you have one. Right. So remember, we had discussion about the how many this picture. Why does this picture have the the 4? Why does it have 8 as opposed to 6? Because this picture is according to right, Rabbi Yehuda says that it's 4, so that's why so therefore you end up getting 13 1/3, which is what you get when you do 1 2/3 times 8, and that is so right. So then they know to do the math. They're recording why is lashon of the Beit the way it is, and they're explaining why lashon is what it is.
Rabbi, each animal is 1 2/3 amos. Is that what we're saying?
Correct. That's what the Beit just stated. So that's what we are operating with, and now we are. So now we're trying to figure out how we can put together that measurement. Right, so we have this Breita, we have our Mishnah. So trying to combine the two to figure out to get exactly how much it is, and why this other Breita doesn't really fit with our exact measurement that it should be. So now we've explained it that it was for parallel language, which is why it's imprecise. Right, it could have said 13 1/3. It just didn't because it was just trying to make the whole thing, flow better. And a lot of times, and also, they were Tsetas, Breitos Mishnas, that they were also formulated in a way that make it easier to remember. So it's important that you do it in such a fashion that you can actually remember it properly. So that's why parallel language is a very big thing, because it's much easier to remember, let's say, remember things in rhyme or in same number of words or in structure than it is to remember simply a list with no connecting themes. Okay, so Amar Papa. So now we're going back to saying the maximal width and how this works. So remember the Mishnah, there's a question of do you need to have posts in the middle if you have boards in the middle if it's too wide. So Papa says that if the well is only 8, right, the air is only 8 wide, then you don't even need to have any posts in the middle. Once the pit is the well, the well or the cistern is 12, then you do, right? So again, look at this diagrams, right? So whether you need or don't need, so it depends on the size of it. Okay, so now we get to a little bit. Let's continue on and see if there's more why. Right, so what are we arguing about then? If if everybody agrees it's 8 on 12, so where's the argument of the Mishnah talking about? Well, then you have or don't need pasin mishmona ba'ad shemesh, right? So it's from 8 to 12. Amo. Rabbi Meir b'inam pshutin, Rabbi Yehuda lo b'inam pshutin. Rabbi Meir said that you would need posts, and Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need posts. Rabbi Papa Mike Mashmalan Tanina. Wait, so what is that? Why are we saying this as a question? Don't we know this from a Breita where we just saw that there's one says 10 is the maximal gap and one says 13 1/3. So then we know why they say what they say. It's because each of them have a different maximal amount based on the number of oxen they can fit through. So what are you talking about? What is this statement teaching us? We knew this already. So, so why is he saying this? Rapapa Braita Losh Miele, but Kamash Milan Braita. Right, you're right. Rapapa didn't hear this Braita, so he taught us his own, which ended up being as was taught in the Braita. So then he hadn't known this particular Braita, but he had come to the same conclusion as the Braita through his understanding of the Tosefta and the Mishnah. Okay. Now, Arias Yoter Bechel Chitzat Chaser Sheyavsha Siman. Okay, so now we're going. Now this is another mnemonic. So again, so what those words mean, we will see in just a moment. So Ba'amine Abai me Rabba. So now Abai asked Rabba, Haris b'diyum din kashir pshutin l'remeir ma'u. What happens if you made the corner the corners as long as the posts? What would Rabbi Meir say? Right, so that would mean that you keep here. Remember about the corner piece. What happens if we lengthen the more so that this is ends up being less than 10? Right, so this is dagger number 12. What would it be then? So Amar Light Tinitua Vavad Sheber Pasin. So we already know the answer to that one because it says that if something's too big, you simply add more pasin. So if you made the diyumdin too long, it should be fine. My love maret v'diyumdin. Lo demapish v'avid shutin. So does not mean, right? So shouldn't you imply from that you can have more posts? Then who cares if the post is separated from the corners or not? So no, Abai would say you can add as many posts as you want, but as in the corners aren't you can't actively make the corners longer. Ihachi. Hi, Levad Shereb Pasin. Shiarbe Pasin Mibayale. So then why would say Levad Shereb Pasin is saying that if he provided creates the board, it should have said that he increases the number of boards, not that he increases the boards. Right? So basically the first language that it says implies that you could possibly lengthen the boards, not just increase the number. So shouldn't it have been more precise in the language? Tani Aj Arba Pasin. Right, or say that. So then you're right. Then Abai said you're right. Then it really should have stated you should increase the number of boards, not that you should make them wider. Ikeda Amri, Amrlet and two Albavat Shabbat Pasin. Another option is how to Abai. What was the question? That so basically, so Rabba says should you learn from Avat Shabbat Pasin? My love the Mabif Aviv Shutin does not mean that you simply made the corner posts longer. Load Arith B'diyumdin. So now we have the reverse side where Rabba is on the opposite side of the argument. Now where Rabba says you increase the number of boards, and then Abai says no, all you need to do is extend the double like the corner posts. And that'll also give us your answer. So I said this too is a reasonable argument in both directions, as it stated that as the Mishnah says, provided he increases the upright boards. So therefore, you can extend the width of the boards themselves. So and then we conclude that you can make the widths of the boards larger as well, and that should work.
Rabbi, maybe I've missed something. And actually, my phone rang and I had to answer it so that I didn't wake the family up. Is there an issue as to how we close that 10 so it's smaller than 10? Is that the argument?
Correct. The question is are we allowed to shrink the gap by making the corner post shorter, right? Or do we have to let's scroll up so I can show you this. Or do we have to start adding all these little posts?
Well, why would there be a thought that either way wouldn't be acceptable as long as you make it less than 10?
So it's based on the lashon of the Mishnah. So depending on how you read it, it could be either saying you either increase the size of the walls or increase the number of the posts.
So we're not looking at the goal; we're looking at the method.
Right. The question is the only way that you can solve it by as long as the majority of more area is covered, or is it that you need that the only way it's kind of like we had by a Mavui, where you can only solve it by lefke koret sort of pataf and by building larger walls to make it worse? So here too, right, we're making a possible similar argument that you can only fix it via posts, not simply by making the sides larger.
Right, and we're also focusing on fixing as opposed to how it started. So in other words, if you had a structure when you first built it that had these corners extending, is that still the same issue, or is it just you have this and now how do you repair it? Does that matter?
I believe it's both. It would be both. As in, the
Okay.
question is the status that currently is? Then if the gap isn't 10 when we're looking at it to begin with, there's no problem. But it's like, but there could be ways that the situation has changed that you could wind up being that it could be a to start. How should I ideally make it versus now it's too big. How do I fix the problem? It could be both.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now back to the question of the length. So now we say when it's searched in a third or more. So what do you do? According to Rabbi Yehuda, Shutin Avid, does he say you should be adding boards, or does he say or do you make the corner posts wider? Which one is it? Some are light, so Rabba said, we just learned this from Beit. How close can they be together? According to the head and the width of the cow. How far can they be from each other? So right, so the post can be as close as the head and the majority of the cow, and they can be as far away as they can be extended to even enclosing a core or a korayim. Right, so meaning that you could fill it in as much as assuming you're not the gaps are never too large, and between them there's no limit to the size of your pasibira. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Beit time gutar your Beit time. So Rabbi Yehuda says no, there's a limit on the maximum size you can make your pasibira. He says you have until Beit time, and that's your limit. So Amrlo Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Yehuda. Why are you limiting our case here? Don't you agree that in the case of a pen, a stable, a backyard, or a courtyard, that even if it can be either 5 core or 10 core, he's like, correct, I agree there. There we're talking about walls. And here we're talking about the pasibira, the boards for the well. They're not the same story. They're different. They work differently. So if he thought that you could extend the walls and not start doing the pshutim, then he should have said that they're both sure to be walls. So therefore, that implied that he doesn't think you're allowed to you're allowed to extend the walls. How could come? He's meant to say Zotar mechitza leh for totaya be'eser. Or they're meant to say as follows: is that it's that when we say mechitza, we're not talking about the walls themselves. We're talking about the ability of the maximum size of the gap. So for the maximum size of the gap for a wall is 10. But the maximum size of the gap for pasibira is different, and for that it is 10. So
I didn't get that, Rabbi.
It is 13.
Oh, so the gap for the pasibira is 13, and for a wall is 10, so it's 3 almost greater?
Yes.
That's according to everybody, or just Rabbi Yehuda?
Just Rabbi Yehuda. According to Remeir, it would be they're both 10. So, by mine abaye miraba. Tell him it lock it arba asar mitoch arba nidon mishum diumad on nidon mishum or in nidon mishum yumad. So if you have a mound that has a height of 10 is at 10 within an area of 4 amot, can we count that as our diumad or not? So again, so it's for what that looks like. So that's this guy right here. So say basically, can we cut it? Is the question. Rabbi Shmuel beno shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer Haita Sham Evan Agula Rowan Kol Sheilu Techakek V'Techalek V'Yesh Ba Amalakan B'Malakan Nidon Mishum Duman V'Imlav Eno Nidon Mishum Duman. So now we're saying it's like we had a round stone in the shape of a pillar. So that would mean that you will you cut it out and right as seen here in diagram 15, and then as long as the you have enough to make a Duma, like if you had cut it out, it would be the right size. That's good enough. So very convenient if you happen to have a lot of columns lying around. Okay, but my Ligi. So what's the argument between them then? So Mar Savar Chadroin Amrinan, the Trey Roin Amrinan, Mar Savar Trey Roin Namrinan. The question is, do we allow you to cut into it on one side or on both sides? So meaning, or do we allow you to? Right, basically, are we only allowed to cut out? Let's say if we had a square post, cut out one side, or are we allowed to cut out on both sides to fully chisel out the Juma that we want? So that's the debate there. So then Abai asked Rabba, Chitzat Hakanim Kaneh Pachot Mishlosha Nido Mishum Juma Rola. So then Abai asked Rabba, if you have a barrier made of reeds and each reed is less than 300 across the next, is that considered? Can you call that to be a Jumad or not? Right. So if we have it made corn made of reeds, is that good? So Amrlai to Nitua. We have this said in another Braita. Hi Sham Yilan or Gader or Chitzat Kanim Nidom Mishum Jumad. My love Kana. So if we allow for a tree, a fence, or for a reed for a reed barrier, it works for Jumad. So what's the difference between that and a usually put in post one reed at a time? So lo gurda dikani. Now maybe when it says that other right, when it says guderiyata dikni, it means a thicket of reeds. It's thicker, not just a simply post, but it means a lot of them. But then it's like, wait, but if that was the case, that would didn't stand as if it's a tree if there's just really that dense and that many reeds. Elamai kana. Rather, what does it mean to say kana pokal mishlosha hainu gadar? When you say that if there's posts all evenly spaced, and it's not the same thing that we have as a fence. Elamai eat lechal meimar trey gavne gadar. So you're going to say that we mentioned gadar twice in the same right? Hakanami trey gavne ilan. So no, the answer is like either way, it's going to be either two fences or two trees. So therefore, it's just fine stating both. So, or you could have stated that what regarding what we said before about the thicket of reeds. So gudriyata dikinima. What do you mean by when we say what's what? If that's a question in a different angle, what do you say about a thicket of reeds? So my love directed to God. So now the question is, so now we're assuming that the original case the Beit was referring to you poked in when you stuck in the reeds one at a time. So now we're asking, what about the case of for the thicket? So would that work? Lo kana mishlosha. No, maybe the Beit was referring to the case of barrier of reeds for less than 3 apart. You have to get it, and that's the same thing as if we had a fence. Then when you say that again, then we have the problem that now our gudriyata of kanim should say things a tree. Elamai itla meimar trey gavni ilan. You're going to say twice that the tree comes twice in the brayza. Hakanami trey gavni get there. So you're right, and then we say that it's either two trees or two fences. So either way, the brayta is still fine, and that's how we conclude in the end. Okay, so that is the picture over here. If you like, okay, so now just to quickly summarize, we went through today. We went through some more statements of Rabbi Yirmiyah talking about Gehenna, and how we know different place for Gehenna as well as different things about entrances to Gan Eden. And we returned to our discussion about possibly road about the maximal width, whether it be 10 amot or it be 13 and a third amot. We spoke about the question of how wide the gaps can be in between them, and at what point you start adding in boards to fill the gaps, as well as we started discussing is for what it qualifies for the post based on different materials, as well as if they're not finished materials in the raw materials, can you cut them out and view them as such or not? Now since later this evening will be Shabbos, so everybody will be doing the next daf on their own, and we will be continuing on Chaf Amud Bet, the 3 lines from the bottom when it says Amar B'Yitzchak Lohotru Pasi Birod Ela Ola Ole Regalim. So we're going to continue. That's 3 lines at the bottom of Chaf Amud Bet. Is that? Yeah. Okay, so does that sound good to everybody? So we continue from there next time?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Rabbi, quick question.
Sure.
Always.
Yeah. The last part, I'm just trying to grapple with. I just found it very, very difficult to. So what we're what we're basically saying is that we're asking whether we could apply the concept of royin to take a tree and imagine as if it is dumyon. So
Yes.
if it has
right.
what?
Yes.
So, and I just didn't get, what was the difference when you said whether you can use 2 sides or 1 side?
So let me scroll up. So I mean, when we say row in, does it mean are we only allowing you to cut out? Let's say if you have a square, a cube, right? So you got a cube like shape number 14. So do we only allow you to cut out 1 side? So here,
What do you mean? I see
side,
2 sides there.
This is cutting out 1 side, but if it's a circle, you're cutting out 2 sides, right? You're cutting out on the outside and on the inside in order for it to be the right structure.
Okay. Okay. And
that's the question, as in how much do we allow you like freedom of viewing, of turning the item from what it is to what we want it to be? Do we only say that, if it's partially rounded and partially square, then you can square it off? Or do we say that as long as we know it's in this this larger structure, there is a square, there is the L shape hidden in there, that's all that matters.
So that would apply to a tree, that a tree is more round. So can we use a tree that would allow us to use a tree if we said that you could do 2 sides, right? I guess. Correct.
Whereas if you say you can use 1 side, then the tree would be a problem.
Knocks the tree out, but what would it allow? What case would it allow just 1 side when you're using royin?
Row it. If you only allow 1 side, that basically only allows you to use means you have to have a right angle on one half of it, was what you'd be required in the right place.
One half of the tree, and then you'd have to have something else to fill it in.
Yes. Meaning if you say only rowan is only for cutting out of the square, so that would mean that it's a very limited application. Only in the structure number 14. But let's say for the tree or for a column or for any other regular shape, let's say the pile of dirt, so then it wouldn't work.
Beautiful. So, and we hold that you can use a tree, so we say that you could use 2 sides for royin?
Yes.
For Dunion. Okay, I think so. Thank you.
My pleasure. Excellent questions.
Okay, have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
You as well. Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos again.